at Monthly Dignity. We're a Montreal-based nonprofit working towards a world where nobody is held back because of their period. We provide period products to those experiencing period poverty. We run free menstrual health workshops and advocate for policies that advance menstrual justice. I also have a habit of speaking very quickly, which I'm trying to undo. So stay with me. The menstrual equity movement has grown really rapidly since the term was coined in 2017. We've seen incredible progress from free menstrual products in schools and workplaces, better policies, and improved research. But as we grow, it's really important to pause and ask ourselves who's at the table and who's missing. Building a diverse, inclusive movement isn't just the right thing to do, it's also the only way to ensure that we grow well and not just fast. In a world that too often ignores or dismisses the needs of people with disabilities, centering disability justice in our work is radical and necessary. We're really fortunate to have community workers, activists, and researchers and advocates here today who are doing this vital work. I also just want to do a brief land acknowledgement. So I want to acknowledge that Monthly Dignity operates on the Haudenosaunee and Mohawk territories. And while we're joining from different locations today, I encourage you to learn about the traditional lands where you reside. Colonialism continues to shape how we view both disability and menstruation, making this acknowledgement particularly relevant to our discussion today. If you would like to learn more about the land that you reside on or you're unsure, I encourage you to start by checking out a really wonderful website that I like called native-land.ca to figure out what native territory that you reside on. And I'm just now going to provide a brief overview. We're still waiting for some of our panelists to come, but that is okay. After this brief introduction from me, Jaisee will facilitate our panel discussion with four amazing panelists. One person had an unfortunate power outage, so Carly's TBD. And we'll reserve 10 to 15 minutes at the end for your questions. So please feel free to use the chat or speaker sign any questions that you have that you want to open for discussion for any of the panelists at the end. I also just want to thank Holly Johnston and Hello Period Equity for providing our ASL interpretation today. It's a pivotal part of this event, and we're super, super grateful to have this opportunity. And I'm excited to hand things over to Jaisee. Jaisee is a student, no longer a student, she's graduated, but who completed the last part of her disability justice degree. She completed an 8-month placement with Monthly Dignity, exploring the intersections of menstrual justice and disability justice. Her empathy and insight made that work really transformative for us as an organization. And I know that she's going to guide us through an equally meaningful discussion today. So Jaisee, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Amazing. Thank you, Haley. I'm very flattered by that introduction. Like Haley said, my name is Jaisee. I am based in Saskatoon. My pronouns are she, her. And I have worked in the disability industry for about 8 years. I do not personally identify as a disabled person, but I'm really grateful to say that we do have a couple people here who are ready to speak about their firsthand experiences today. So that's going to be great. We will introduce our panelists in a second, but before we start, I will just ask that everybody please leave your mics on mute unless you are speaking. And if you have questions as our panelists are speaking, you can put those into the chat. And like Haley said, at the end of our discussion, we will have some time to answer some of those questions. Okay, so let's get us started. We have hopefully 4 panelists here. Is everybody here now, maybe with the exception of Carly, or are we still waiting on Tasnim and Kit?
We have Tasnim here.
Okay.
I'm sending the link again to
Oh, okay. Kit is joining, but just had the wrong link.
Okay, no problem. Why don't we start with Holly? Holly, in just about 2 minutes, can you tell us your name, pronouns, what's bringing you to this space today, and maybe where you are joining us from?
Yes, thank you. My name is Holly Johnston. I identify as she, her. I am coming to you from the unceded and traditional territory of the Algonquins of the Anishinaabe Nation, otherwise known as Ottawa. And I am new to the area, so I'm very excited to be here. Hello Period Equity is the mother of an organization kind of that encompasses not only menstrual equity, but those with barriers to receiving menstrual education and support, those who are living with varied abilities, and how we can bring into the fold other people's voices besides the status quo, especially here in Canada, how it's really, really important. Like Haley said earlier, who's not at the table and who's still missing. And it's important that we talk about it, that we bring others into the world of menstrual health and dignity. And I'm very excited to be here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Holly. Tasnim, do you mind introducing yourself, name, pronouns, what brings you here, and where you are at the moment?
Yes, sounds good. Can everyone hear me? I'm joining by hotspotting my connection as I'm moving. We're still setting up the Wi-Fi here, but thank you so much. I'm really glad that you all are here, and I am super excited to speak today on this topic. My name is Tasnim Jaisee. I use she, her pronouns. I am joining from Treaty 6 territory area, specifically from what is now known as the city of Saskatoon in Saskatchewan. And so I am a person with disabilities and a woman of color as well, and I'm a wheelchair user. I'm a menstruator myself too, and I've been involved in this work for quite a while, going back to essentially my undergrad days when I was the Women's Center coordinator as part of the Students' Union here at the University of Saskatchewan. And so this advocacy for me has certainly been elevated through the work experiences supporting feminist causes, women's rights issues on a student level. And after my time at the community center, I was elected as president of the Students' Union as well at the University of Saskatchewan. And at that time, we ran a successful campaign and was very excited to get a commitment from the university to have free pads and tampons at the university campus in Saskatoon. And so the University of Saskatchewan, following that recommendation and commitment, has installed over 70 dispensers at the University of Saskatchewan campus. So I say that to essentially ground, my perspective at this work from how I was able to essentially, find myself in this advocacy space from a student governance space into an advocacy and a commitment piece that was actualized and, created that really, you know, um, created that space to create ongoing menstrual equity at the University of Saskatchewan. And so today I will be speaking as more so myself as a person with disabilities and a menstruator as well. And right now, within my workspace, having moved from the student government area, I now work for the University of Saskatchewan as well, kind of facilitating what we call the Period Equity Project, which is what I mentioned, provides our campus community with pads and tampons as part of our work. But yeah, more so, I will be speaking from my personal experiences grounded within that work. So thank you so much for having me here.
Amazing. Thank you, Tasnim. I want to first of all applaud your work getting that done on the U of S campus. And I'm incredibly grateful to have you here because first person perspective is ultimately what's most important. So we really appreciate that. Okay, Kit, do you mind introducing yourself briefly? A couple of minutes, your name, pronouns, what brings you here, and where you currently are speaking to us from?
Yes. So I'm Kit. I'm the CEO of Tina Healthcare. We're a startup that our flagship product was an accessibility device, is an accessibility device for using tampons. My background is in like startup business operations, product development, sourcing, and those kind of things. And a few years ago, I made the decision to move to like use these skills to move into a space where I felt like I was doing good in the world, not just creating more products that are like used and have a lifetime and then used some more, or we, make more. And so that was really my entry into this space, which has been a fascinating journey of people's stories in the world of menstruation and menstrual equity products that we create associated with it. We're still getting over the stigma of talking about it as women. Like my mother never talked about it. I don't think she said the word vagina ever in her life, actually. So we're coming from a place of, and then let's not even talk about women in business. So we weren't even had a seat at the table to talk about these things. So it's really been a fascinating couple of years now being deep in the space of talking to folks about their experiences, about what works for them and what doesn't. I'm really passionate about the tampon. When you look at the patent for the tampon created by a man 90 years ago, it looks exactly like the ones that we use today. And, we put a man on the moon between now and then. So the fact that we haven't come up with better solutions for women and that we haven't even asked the question about, hey, like, is it working? Does what we have work for general people, and then specifically for people who might have trouble with their dexterity or mobility or many other things, or body dysmorphia or anything that might cause you to get the care or use the products that you need to. So it's been really great to be in this space and have learned a lot about what it takes to bring products to life that are in the accessibility space. And through that, fascinatingly, have heard more from women who are in my life and have been in my life for decades about their experiences. And I would never know, like, that tampons don't work for them. And I think, gosh, I thought we were really open and we talked about everything. And here we are. It took opening the conversation to really learn about that as well. So I'm very excited to be here to hear people's stories and perspective, and to lend a little bit of perspective from a product development side.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Kit. And I do want to give you a shout out. When I was doing my student placement with Monthly Dignity, I spent 8 months deep diving into every dark corner of the internet, trying to find any and all information about disabilities and periods. And the information is not easy to find, but I will say that your product is one of the first things that I found. It is very easy to find, and it is there for people if they're looking for it. So I think that is amazing, and I'm really grateful to have you here today. Okay, and then finally, did Carly make it here with the power outage?
No, unfortunately, I haven't been able to get a hold of her at all. So.
Well, we will hope that Carly joins us at some point.
Yeah.
We were supposed to have Carly here as well, but that's okay. We will proceed on and make do. And Holly, if you don't mind, if you do see Carly pop in, just maybe interrupt us and let us know so that we can include her as well. Okay, with that, we are going to hop into our discussion. So we've got kind of a few different levels we're going to go through here, starting with kind of more personal experience, moving to the barriers we see more systemically, and then solutions and how we can move the movement forward. So I want to start, though, by giving a bit of background on what intersectionality actually means, because that's kind of the focus of what we're looking at today. And it's kind of a big word that I think can be a little bit intimidating if you're not familiar with it. But intersectionality basically is the idea that nothing that we experience in our lives happens in a vacuum, right? So I experience the world as a white person, as I'm blessed enough to say a middle class person, as a female and a menstruator. And that is how I experience the world. But if we were to change any one of those things, also as an able-bodied individual, if we were to change any one of those things, my experience of all of those other things would also be impacted, right? So we can never discount the experiences of people who just have different experiences than us, whether that is in disability or ability, whether that is in skin color or ethnic background, whether that is in class, family support. Like there's so many different things that impact our lives. And while we tend to channel them into these like perfectly neat little columns, in reality, it's never that neat and never that simple. And every aspect of who we are impacts every other aspect of who we are. And this is something that's really important because from all of the research that I have done, everything has said that in the menstrual space, we don't talk about people with disabilities. There's a lot of misconceptions about people with disabilities being asexual or not worthy of reproduction, and therefore, why would periods matter? And obviously, those are some really big misconceptions that we need to challenge. And there and so it just doesn't get talked about. And I mentioned this to Haley in the past, but I've worked for, like I said, 8 years in disability spaces and specifically in occupational therapy departments, which is meant to help people, ensure they're independent with bathing, toileting, dressing. And in these spaces, I have never once heard periods brought up, which is a huge problem. That is a very big problem. And so I'm really, really glad that these conversations are beginning to happen. Because obviously, for about approximately 50% of our population, periods are a reality, regardless of ability or disability. And it's something that we need to talk about. So with that being said, we are going to jump in. Tasnim, I'm going to start with you. Can you speak for a couple of minutes about how menstrual health challenges specifically impact people with disabilities? And we would love to hear from your personal experience if you're comfortable sharing that, and how those experiences differ from non-disabled populations.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. I think it's a really good one to start us off because the thing is, from my personal lived experiences, again, to reiterate, I am a wheelchair user. And so what happens is during, for example, sex ed in elementary school classrooms, um, more often than not, students with wheelchairs um, don't participate in gym class, right? Sex ed, however, happens during those gym class blocks in certain years. And so essentially, for most of my life, during the elementary school phases, I got no sex ed because for me, at that time, I'd get like a free period, like a free block of time, right? And so I was missing all those core lessons, and even as we all know here, sex ed in many classrooms, there's oftentimes barriers even in accessing some of the basic knowledge. For myself, I had zero because I just wasn't even present in those spaces, and so that in itself is an immediate, I would say, red flag for different than. Non-physically disabled people's experiences that I've had. And I certainly imagine I'm not the only person. I've heard stories like this of other disabled youth kind of not being in those classes, so never receiving any type of menstrual health related information in those classes. And so I would say that it starts from, a problem from the youth spaces on this lack of knowledge that people with disabilities themselves on the broad spectrum could be facing, and that lack of resources just kind of, I would say, snowballs into bigger and bigger issues down the road. And I think that's a very big problem in terms of people with disabilities being able to care for themselves, have access to these products, and also I think it's a problem that you know, folks at large who are supposed to be supporting youth with disabilities, don't maybe know that why that's so important to be teaching kids with disabilities from a young age and such. So I would say that's how I'd like to answer that one. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Tasnim. That is really insightful. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask a quick follow-up question just to say, do you have any thoughts about, assuming you had been included in the sex ed conversations, any thoughts about creating those conversations to be a little bit more inclusive had you been involved in the first place?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say, the first one that comes to my mind, if I was to be involved, um, using period products, right? So if we think of some of the most common types of period products, I would say pads and tampons, right? And so the utilization of those products, if I was involved in those classrooms, oftentimes I found it to be when I was trying to self-teach to be difficult because many of, videos and stuff, will say sometimes you may need to twist this way, you will need to like stand up, to put on, a pad or a tampon. And for me, as an individual that uses a wheelchair, cannot stand up, those were big barriers. I was I was locked into kind of very finding myself to be not sure how to navigate those things. I thankfully had some close friends that supported me, but those resources to be more inclusive of people with disabilities um, would would be so groundbreaking if they were already built in with considering the lives of people with different types of disabilities and different types of hand functions and such. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that insight, Tasneem. I'm going to move over to Kit now. Kit, can you tell us what gaps have you identified in the current menstrual products? And actually, this tags well onto what Tasneem was just saying. What gaps have you identified in current menstrual products and facilities when it comes to accessibility?
Yeah, well, I think the truth is, and you mentioned this also, Jaisee, there is almost nothing like in this space. Particularly for the products that Tasneem, as you said, it's pads and tampons. Mostly. We also have menstrual cups now, but the truth is, any product that works like a tampon, that requires insertion in the body, if you have trouble reaching, if you have trouble with hand dexterity, you're going to have a problem with any of those. So it doesn't matter if it's a tampon or a cup, you still have to do a similar motion. It requires way more hand dexterity than I think I would consider as a person who has full functionality of my hands. And so there was nothing to model this off of for us. And that is fascinating. What it also I think is true about this is our founder, Ellie, is a biomedical engineer. So she has a background in this. And she started looking at the tampon itself, thinking the tampon might need to be redesigned. And she found in her conversations, very big in user-centered design, universal design principles. So she went out and asked a bunch of women, was actually in some like Facebook groups with people who have spinal cord injuries, and realized, first of all, horrific stories about, well, if you don't want to use a pad, the next option they gave was a hysterectomy, which is like insane. It's insane that would even be a thing that would be considered. And so I think that was kind of lit a fire for her to figure out if there was another option out there, and expanded the conversation, and then realized, wait a minute, like, yes, folks who have trouble with mobility, dexterity, motor control, any of those things. Reach also, if your body is shaped in a way that it's hard for you to reach, yes, they have trouble, but also there's a ton of people out there because we don't talk about how hard it is for the people who have the most trouble using a product. We are also missing a whole range of people who have a little trouble using the product, but don't talk about it because nobody else is talking about it, if that makes sense. So I think the interesting thing about the space and the product, so we specifically designed Tina to work with tampons. There is no other accessibility device as far as we are aware. We've done a lot of research, but new things are coming out every day that will help with hand dexterity or reach for tampons. There is nothing really for menstrual cups at all. We've been looking into that ourselves. There are some, I think a little bit more innovation in the space of period underwear and versions of pads, but they don't work for everybody and they don't work for all activities. And so I think that is really where we're at right now. And the interesting thing I just would note about this when it comes to product development and manufacturing is the problem doesn't just start here with people having ideas. That is, of course, where we have to start the conversation. But we as we were doing this, we thought, maybe we could just make a tampon with a little longer string, because if you have trouble reaching, like we actually had a wonderful beta tester for us. And she's like, I knotted up some string on the end of my tampon to give myself more reach. Love it when we've got a MacGyver. And we thought, great, let's just make a tampon with more string. We'll see if that flies. And that is an almost impossible task. So all tampons are manufactured on a similar machine. That machine is made from one machinery company. That is a family-owned business. It is run by men. And you need $2 million and there's a 4-year lead time. If we wanted to make our own machine, and that just to make the string on a tampon 3 centimeters longer. So when we talk about like the systemic problem with bringing products to market, that is almost impossible. Like, it's wonderful if you can do a small batch and try something out, see how it works in the world. And when we ask ourselves, why are there not more products that would help people in this space, and then being in the space have started to understand how important talking about it is, because the more we talk about it and the more we put products out there, the more I think we could move the needle on the whole supply chain problem that gets us here to begin with. So that has been our experience over the last 3 years as a product development company and manufacturer in this space.
Well, let me say my jaw just hit the floor. That is unbelievable. I'm mind blown by that. I'm sorry. I'm kind of left a little bit speechless by that, actually.
Yeah.
Sorry, my dog, everybody say hi to Alfredo. Alfredo, oh, he's blurry, sorry. If you can see through the blur, he is pestering me at the moment. Anyways, one of the things I wanted to add to what you said, Kit, is for everybody, regardless of ability or disability or whatever your body looks like, we all like to try various products and figure out what works best for us. And the reality is that these products are not cheap. And a lot of people who have disabilities are living on fixed incomes too. So even if you find a product that you think might work for you, actually getting access to that can be a monumental task, right? Because it can be so expensive. And if people don't have the finances to access it, that's a huge problem too. So yeah, we need products to exist in the first place, but we also need them to be something that people can actually access once they exist. And we got a long way to go.
Yeah, and I'll just quick follow up on that as a side note is even the process I'm so sorry, I forgot to say, I'm in the US, I'm in Michigan. And even the process for HSA, FSA approval, which might help with some of that, because our product is not strictly accessibility, they call it dual purpose. It's so much harder to get HSA approval, a thing that would then make this more accessible for everyone, but particularly people who need some financial help with that. there's some workarounds to all of it, but just another side note when we start talking about how all of these things stack up, and makes it so much harder for those of us who are like trying to bring things to market and for folks who are looking for things in the market.
Absolutely. Yeah. If anybody is interested in looking at some of the products that are available, there is a link on Monthly Dignity's website of like everything that I was able to find during my 8 months of deep diving for Monthly Dignity. Unfortunately, it is a short list, like Kit said, but if you're interested in checking it out, that is on the Monthly Dignity website. Okay, I am going to move on to another question here. This is a question that's kind of directed at all three of the panelists, but I'm going to maybe start with Holly just because you haven't had an opportunity to speak to us yet. Holly, could you tell us or share a specific example of how disability justice principles can transform menstrual equity work?
Hi, thank you for having me speak on this. I feel really bad. I just wanted to let everyone know that Carly, who is my right hand, left hand, every hand, is not able to make it today because her power has not come back on. And Carly is our disabled portion of our Periods for All. And so we're really sorry to miss her today. Absolutely. But I just want to let you know that. So I am going to speak on what Carly and I have already talked about and what we kind of have activated with Periods for All, which is the portion of Hello Period Equity that is a nonprofit based specifically. So we apply for grants and try and build resources for those with varied abilities, right? And it's really, really important to us with Periods for All that we're centering disabled voices. So that's why it's a little bit sad that Carly's here, is I'm an able-bodied woman here. But I will talk to you a little bit about what we're doing and the importance of nothing for us without us. Because it's not just a catchphrase, but it definitely serves as a reminder that when you're building systems and structures, and for us, resources for people with disabilities, that we're not just thinking about the end user, but that we have people who have those requirements when it comes to menstrual equity, and that we're serving those voices. And that's why it's really, really important. And speaking of that, I'd like to give a shout out to Ledan here, who is an award-winning director and deaf ASL user that directed our new films that we just launched yesterday, Menstrual Matters, which is understanding menstrual health in ASL. And we are super, super excited about it and how important it is to center disabled voices, and how grateful we were to have Ledan come and join us on that project. So I just want to let you know that. I think it's really, really important that all of the work that we're doing, we're not just coming up with the ideas ourselves, but that we have other people that we bring along to join us and to collaborate that way with people who have their own experiences. And everybody has different experiences. And me being able-bodied, I might be able to come up with resources because I am a supporter of people with varied abilities when it comes to menstrual health and menstrual education. So I see the lack of resources and I work on trying to fill those gaps, but I don't have the experiences. And it's really important to firsthand make sure to not only build ideas, but work on some of those systems with the people who have the lived experiences of the challenges of dealing with menstrual health and their disabilities. So I think it's really, really important to remember that there's a lot of work to be done, but we can do it better when we do it together. And yeah, and I'm grateful. Thank you for having me here today. And hopefully with Periods for All, we'll just keep getting all those grants and we'll keep trying to fill all those gaps and make sure that that there is dignity for people with lots of different experiences when it comes to their menstrual health, and we'll just keep that education flowing. Thank you.
Thank you for those insights, Holly. Tasnim and Kit, do you have anything to add to that before we move on? It's okay if you don't, we can move on. Okay, perfect. So we've talked a little bit about some of, the personal experiences and challenges that we have encountered, and we're going to move on to more systemic barriers and hopefully systemic solutions that we can talk about. So again, I'm going to start with Tasnim again. You've talked a little bit about education already, and that certainly is speaking as someone who does not have the firsthand experience that you do, I think probably one of the most significant barriers that all menstruators are facing, regardless of disability. But I wonder if there are any other systemic barriers that you would identify and want to talk about today for menstruators with disabilities.
I would say that more so systemic barriers. There's a lot of a lot of stigma and shame associated with menstruation, and especially for people with disabilities, we're often not involved in those conversations, and so thereby, if the problem isn't even identified, um, for finding a solution to dispel those stigmas and shame and stereotypes becomes much even harder. And then I would say that oftentimes, like in terms of systemic barriers, that you know, oftentimes, I've already touched on the education part of this conversation, but more so in terms of, accessing vending dispensers, right? When you're in public spaces. I want to touch on essentially physical infrastructure issues in our day-to-day world and lives that, I've been in many spaces where, I've actually seen spaces where it's great. There's free products, pads and tampons in a public washroom, but then the dispenser will be very high up. And so as someone who's sitting down, I couldn't access that unless perchance that I had someone a close friend or someone that I know with me, or maybe even have to wait for the next person who comes into the washroom that is someone who's walking and is able to reach that dispenser. So that's a very common physical infrastructure issue that I've noticed. It's these types of things that are, end up becoming a bigger discussion on physical infrastructure issues. At the University of Saskatchewan, when we implemented the vending dispensers, that was one of the recommendations that I had made for the vending dispensers to be, in the washrooms that would fit them, to be in a space where the dispensers are low enough for folks with, diverse range of heights and such would be able to reach the pads and tampons, and it would be able to turn the levers and such if they needed a product. So that's a systemic barrier of infrastructure that I continue to notice within the discussion.
Yeah, I really appreciate that insight. Oh,
Sorry, Jessica. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I'd love to just piggyback on that really, really quickly. When we, with Ladan, had done the menstrual health videos, one of the things that we talked about that I think is really important, not a lot of people have seen it yet, but that Hello Period Equity has started importing from the United States, is pads on a roll. No, see, wrong way, that way, my camera. So this is pads on a roll, and we are trying to bring them into accessible washrooms. So it's just literally like toilet paper, and you pull it off and the pad is right inside. And it doesn't even have wings. So the amazing thing about it is for people with dexterity issues with their fingers and stuff, they're not having to fumble around. This comes off. Whoops. This comes off so easy. And then it just sticks to your underwear. Now, one of the things that we are bringing it in for is accessible washrooms. Because it's on a toilet paper roll, you don't actually have to use this. You can put it onto standard toilet paper roll holders. And you know, in washrooms, when they have two, I mean, it's such a waste, right? Because you have one, you could have pads on a roll on. And then the other one, you could have standard toilet paper, which is really, really important, especially with mobility issues. And as anyone here who menstruates, know that sometimes you don't know until you sit down on that toilet and then you realize, oh, and the idea of having to go outside that stall to access it as someone who's able-bodied, for me, just seems like a lot. I couldn't imagine if I had to try and go in reverse all of the effort and work that it took me to get to that point, and then had to go out. And when I hear Tasnim's story about waiting for someone, that just like crushes my heart. And I really, really am working hard to try and get these pads on a roll in all the washrooms. And then they sit right in the washroom stalls. And no one has to even get off the toilet to access these products, which is really, really important in the accessibility space, because they're products that are developed not for people with disabilities, but because it's such an accessible product, everybody benefits. So it is really, really important. So if anybody wants to know anything more about that, you can look at Periods for All website or Hello Period Equity Pledge. And if anyone is interested or wants to bring them in for accessible washrooms, or any washroom stalls for that matter, just make sure to reach out to me, because I think it is really, really a very important point that Tasnim brought up, which is how are folks managing the added stress of having to figure it out as someone who may not have all the accessibility to these products. So anyways, sorry to interrupt you, Jessica. I just wanted to throw that out there because it was such an important intersection there to make sure that products are accessible for everybody.
No need to apologize. What an incredibly cool product, and that solves so many problems, right? It solves issues of accessibility. It solves issues of like financial access. It solves a lot of things. So I'm really glad that you showed that to us today. And thank you, Tasnim, for discussing physical infrastructure. That is something that I think gets very easily overlooked when you are not used to having to overcome some of those barriers. Even things like ensuring that a public washroom is easy to navigate if you have low or no vision is something that we don't really think about, right? Or ensuring that public washrooms have gender neutral space for people who have gender identities that don't match their physical body, or who just require a caregiver to help them in the washroom, and their caregiver may not match their gender, right? Things like that we just don't think about unless we actually need it. And so I'm really glad that we are talking about physical spaces. I'm going to move on to Kit next. You discussed a little bit about some of the products that you have developed and are trying to develop. But I wonder if you could talk to us. Obviously, the word disability can mean a million and one different things to different people. No one person's disability looks the same as another. So I wonder if you could talk to us about what a quote unquote accessible product actually looks like, considering that wide range of disabilities.
Yeah. Also, I just want to give a shout out to Pads on a Roll, which, Holly, much like every accessible product I've ever seen, the minute I see it, I go, well, that's brilliant. Why haven't we been doing that since the beginning, right? Every single time. That is incredible. So thank you for sharing. That's amazing. And solves so many problems. And I think that when it comes to product development and what accessible looks like, there are so many different ways to answer this question, from like the big picture down to the small picture. First of all, I think that we would never want to talk about a product being accessible for a type of user if we had not heard from that user themselves. So first and foremost, you don't even claim accessibility unless you have centered the person that you are talking about who has the disability, and have heard from them, and also multiple people. So first and foremost, as a part of the design process, you need to, I would say we would never make a claim unless we had heard from those people themselves. But it's also not just the product. We have developed Tina, the tampon insertion aid, to work with, we have different things. You can put a hand strap on it. If you have one problem, you can use an adapter for other problems. So we're trying to hit the broadest number of people that we can in that. I think that there is a really great question about, is it better to be solely focused on making this the most accessible product for one group of people, and you're 10 out of 10 for that group of people, or what do you get if you're an 8 out of 10, but you can hit more folks in there, versus our current set of products, which only works for like people who are fully able-bodied, but then you get a whole population. And I will tell you guys, I struggle with that every day. I struggle with it when it comes to the design of our products, to how we market those products, to the cost of the product, and like always trying to be outside of the box in the way that we can maneuver, add things on or not. I would say that it includes up to and including the packaging of the product, which, can you imagine going through creating a product that is very accessible? We talk about having finger dexterity and mobility, and then putting it in a box that is hard to open, which is like a real thing that we have seen out in the world. So I think you have to consider the entire life cycle. It includes our website. Is our website navigable for folks to be able to find this who might be looking for it? And I think everything, the way that we talk about it in ads and in spaces like that. So I think there's just a version of accessibility that you really have to go end to end, from concept to until it gets in somebody's hands. Have we considered the user in all of that? And I think where we've landed is we try to get ourselves the best that we can to get a product out. I think we could still be tweaking Tina from 3 years ago if we tried to do 100%, but that we are in a state of continuous improvement and learning and hearing from people is very important to us. And the other thing I will say about accessibility products and where you find them and how they like physically look is, it feels like, at least from my perspective, many of them are made to function like a medical device. So they look and appear medical in the way that the product is built, in the way that it's packaged, and in the places where you get it. And I think when that is your only, like, kind of that's sort of the way that the current system is set up for creating products and getting them into the hands of the users. And one, I think that's a very limiting way to look at this. We build and market our product as if it is for everyone, but the focus is very specifically on folks who have reach, mobility, or dexterity issues. And I think that in itself, treating it like a product, like I would a box of tampons for everybody, in and of itself opens up how accessible it is to people who are out there. Yeah.
Absolutely. And hopefully, as more products become available, right, there's not as much pressure to make something that will meet everybody's needs, because there will be a product for column A and a product for column B and a product for column C. And hopefully we can just continue to build on that. Okay, so moving from there, this segues really nicely. So we've talked about all of the things we need to think about when designing accessible products and accessible spaces. And Holly, can you talk to us, when menstrual equity advocates are campaigning for policies and education and advocacy, how can they ensure that those campaigns and the policies that they're advocating for really truly are inclusive of the disabled experience?
Yeah, no, I'll try and answer that without my Carly here. But I think one of the most important things that is about the word collaborate. When I talked about nothing for us without us, I think one of the strengths of the disabled justice community is that they serve more than, it's not just about justice for the sake of justice. It's really important that because disability, like you said earlier, has such a variation of experiences, that I think the communities have they're really winning at the collaboration part of it, that together there is more work that can be done when they include everyone. And an important part of menstrual equity, when it intersects with disability justice, is that when resources are built, when structures are built right from the very beginning that do include everyone, and when it comes, like Kit had said, not just product, but packaging and every thought that goes into it, if it's done right the first time, everybody is included. And that's a strength that I think has been built up from disability justice when you are combating the status quo, that if thoughts of making it accessible and inclusive of everyone from the very beginning happens. And I do think in a lot of areas, Canada is doing well in that. I think that especially where I was living in BC, the government and policies were more willing to have those conversations when you bring it up. Being new to Ontario, we'll see how it goes. But accessibility is really, really important. And if you do it right from the very beginning, it's actually not as much work as people might think. It's taking the time to consider the experiences of other people, even right to this event today. When I spoke to Haley about it in the very beginning and having ASL interpretation, a lot of people may have thought, well, I'll do that another time, or how many people are actually coming that require ASL interpretation. But it is very important to think about those things when you're holding events. If you're going to talk about inclusion and accessibility, you have to think about those things. That's an obligation to bring communities together. And menstrual equity is a huge disability justice community platform. It's a great way for us to collaborate and to bring our heads together, and how can we support each other. And I'm just grateful to be here today to talk more about this. I'm very excited that Monthly Dignity is bringing up this very, very important conversation about disability justice. And I think when I look at all these faces here today, I think how much work we can get done if we put our heads together and work to create a larger community when it comes to disability justice and menstrual health.
Thank you, Holly. That is really insightful. I had some questions kind of for the three of you, but I think I might actually dive into a few more individual questions here first, because I think they're going to lead really nicely into these more conversational questions. So, Holly, I'm actually going to come right back to you. We're going to boomerang back to you. We were talking about how disability is so broad and it can be hard to define, and that community work, how can we ensure that the advocacy we're doing, the work we're doing, is happening very collaboratively and in a community fashion, rather than working in silos for individual communities?
I think one of the hardest things that gets easily forgotten is because there's such a variation of people's barriers and abilities, that we need to bring voices that may not seem like the most prominent, and bringing people together in committees that have varying abilities is really, really important. When we put together our board for Periods for All, we tried to recruit people with varying abilities. When Carly can often be a wheelchair user, Madeline has diverse needs that fluctuate. I am a parent with children with diverse needs, and a supporter of people who have a lot of different menstrual experiences based on their disabilities. But together we can create a better world when it comes to menstrual equity, and realizing that I'm not going to be able to do that alone. And that was really a humbling experience when we had Ladan come on to do the menstrual health videos in sign language. That was a dream come true of mine years and years ago, when I met with a friend who I was trying to support her daughter who has autism with her first period. And the more research I did, like you, Jaisee, I found that there wasn't a lot of resources for people who were autistic that may have a difference in processing. And how was I going to reach them if people have not developed the resources for them? Because I have very limited experiences specifically with autism when it relates to periods. And then when I had Ladan come on, I had a great idea about filling a need and a gap for ASL users to get vital health information. So sign language needed to be there for them. Just an idea, and thinking I could pull that together. And then Ladan teaching me and us how that was going to work. What was it going to be like for someone who was an ASL user, and what types of things were important to them, and how some of the ideas I had just would not work for her. And that it was such a learning experience, and I really, really appreciated having her voice centered in this. And I hope you appreciate the videos, and I learned so much. And I think the silo is, we all have perhaps ideas about what will help, because I think we're all here as people that find helping an important part of what we do. However, our experience and centering the ideas that we have are not nearly as valuable as bringing everybody's ideas to the table. And so I'm so lucky that I have learned so much this time from Ladan, and I can learn from all of you.
Yeah, it's amazing what happens when we take a second to just sit back and say, you know, I actually don't know everything, and let me see who can teach me a little bit, and things start to happen. That's really cool. Thank you, Holly. Okay, I'm going to open it up to all three of you here, and just say, when you think about more broadly, Canada and the US, and then also more specifically in your home city or province or state, what progress needs to be made in those spaces? What progress can we start working towards to make this a more inclusive space?
I'll jump in. I'll start with one while others are thinking. One of the things I was thinking about when I was prepping for today is accessible washrooms. I think it is still quite a weakness of community society in general. And most recently, I saw a video from the UK about some accessible washrooms that were kind of popping up in different rural communities that had full change tables, showers, and things like that. And they were mobile washrooms. And to see that on video and to think in Canada, I have never seen anything like that was really surprising to me. So then I started thinking about accessible washrooms in general. And I do follow a lot of policymakers as well as people who work on accessible washroom audits. And I have realized that there's not a lot of washrooms that will meet the needs of anyone who requires more than policymakers are willing to give. But also, none of them talk about menstrual health. None of the washrooms I have ever seen have menstrual product specifically in accessible washrooms. Almost like policymakers or organizations or builders don't believe that anyone who has a disability menstruates. And I think that's very telling of how a lot of society still views disabled experiences, and how not a lot of people want to change policies that might create a little bit more work for them to make spaces accessible and inclusive for people with disabilities. So I'm hoping to change that.
Holly, just want to agree with the fact that I think all of this starts with conversation. I think there's also a piece of it where like we don't talk about menstruation at all. And would love to have women. I'm a licensed builder myself, so I'm very passionate about women building things and being in engineering and the trades, but it's still not prevalent as much as you would like it to be. So we have from the top down, these things are being created by people who like don't even want to think about periods. Like they don't know, it's not their problem. They get a little, so I think the stigma is even with women talking about it, is a huge problem. I think the policy portion is necessary. And the thing that I want to add on to that is because I've worked in industries that are, like private industries where really what you're looking at is the bottom line always in a business. And you can have some values around that you say, hey, I'm going to spend a little more money, or I'm going to keep some products on that maybe have a smaller potential consumer base because I feel it aligns with our values. But the truth is, I think this is where a lot of these things die. A lot of these good ideas die or get, they're on the chopping block in the budget standpoint or in the review of product standpoint. So this would also be my plug to support smaller businesses, because I think we are the ones that have the ability to make those decisions, as opposed to I've worked in billion-dollar businesses and how difficult it is, even if you have an entire team aligned on how important it is to like get it through execution and staying power. The only way then for that is for there to be some policy changes, which really sort of become more systemic for everyone. So, supporting the small businesses that can figure out how to do it, and then also having this larger policy piece, I think are two big pieces of the puzzle.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kit. LaDan, I saw you had your hand raised. Did you have something you wanted to share?
I did. Thank you very much. I'll be brief. Just a personal experience that I wanted to share. I also notice in public washrooms that they don't provide ta pads. Sometimes they'll provide tampons, but not pads. So for those of us who are not tampon users, you don't have that provided. Like they don't have the dispensary or anything in the bathroom. I mean, you end up having to wad up a lump of toilet paper or something if you're stuck at work and maybe you're working all night and you don't have an opportunity to get one. I feel like Holly had mentioned all public washrooms should have that pad on a roll or should provide free pads. So hopefully advocacy gets somewhere and we see that in our public washrooms. I also wanted to say thank you to Holly, sharing my experience growing up in Iran. We weren't provided sex education. It was not allowed in my country, so that education was not provided. I mean, the men or the boys were provided education, but the women were not. And, getting close to marriage in our culture, that's basically how we learn about sex. And that's the way our religion works. I'm single, I'm not married, so thank my mom for that. But moving to Canada, I started to realize that sex education was a thing, that there was actually a class that taught people about this. But although it is a thing, how often do you have ASL interpretation provided to actually access that sex education? There are workshops, there are things on menstruation and periods, but they're not always made accessible. So I agree with you, Holly, 100%. Often people are looking at the bottom line and, oh, how much does an interpreter cost? No, deaf people don't need to know about this information. So access isn't provided for people who have different abilities. They don't get the same education, but this topic is so important for everyone's life. So again, thank you to Holly for offering the opportunity to me to look into working with periods and doing the film, because in my research, I realized how little information there actually is about this for people who are ASL users. So thank you for that opportunity. And now there is a film out there in ASL for those who want that education. Anyone who's interested in the film, please feel free to ask Holly for the link, or you can find that as well. But yeah, even just making like sex education and other information on periods accessible. So thank you. I look forward to those workshops. Sorry, I said it would be brief and I wasn't.
All good. Thank you, Ladan. I really appreciate your first person insights because again, when you aren't living it yourself, it's really easy to overlook things, and we really appreciate that. And I do also appreciate your comment about product choice because that is just so important. Even for myself, again, I don't have a disability, but let me tell you, I got my first period when I was 9 years old. I was so young, and I was not able to use an internal product without pain until I was 21. So that's like the first 12 years of my menstrual experience. I literally could not put in a tampon. It was like the most excruciatingly painful thing for a lot of reasons. That got sorted out. Things are better now. But like you said, if that's the only thing being offered, I would have had nothing and I would have resorted, like you said, to like wrapping up toilet paper or something. And especially as a teenager, like there's nothing with the stigma we have in our world, there's nothing that would have been like more horrifying or more embarrassing to me than having to like ask somebody for a menstrual pad. And so yeah, just like talking about it and making sure that products are accessible and available and that there's choice there is so important. It's so very important. So I really appreciate your insight. I'm going to move on to our next question here. Um, and actually, I think this like, once again ties in. This has all just flown so beautifully. Tasnim, we're going to come back to you. And I suspect I am going to know your answer, but I would love to hear it from you yourself. Is what role should people with disabilities be playing in leading menstrual equity advocacy? I think that the short answer is all of the roles. Let's have people everywhere. But I'd love to hear more specifics from you about what you think that can look like.
Yeah, I would say for this one, um, we're talking about in this conversation a broad range of disabilities, and that is really, really important, right? And so the thing is, like, for what role we should play as people with disabilities, I think it's gonna be really important that, people with disabilities are not tokenized in this conversation, and also acknowledging that, too often, many companies and organizations will get a disability consult of some sort, which, of course, if you have one individual giving a disability perspective on a project or an initiative, and in this circumstance, a menstrual equity initiatives, right? That's great that you have at least one voice or perspective of a disabled person, but that doesn't account for a broad range of people with disabilities and their lived experiences. I myself am a wheelchair user. I couldn't speak on behalf of all people with who use wheelchairs, right? And so with that being said, I think that's why how people with disabilities can play more so leading roles in this advocacy is to include more of us with diverse types of disabilities, and don't tokenize us essentially, and understand that, we're all unique in our needs, and that in order for something to be truly accessible, a truly accessible pathway for menstrual equity, there has to be a better way of, consulting with us, inviting us to the decision-making tables, and decision-making tables themselves have to be accessible. So that's what I think is very critical.
Absolutely. And building on that, then, Kit, from the manufacturer perspective and the design perspective, how can we ensure that that innovation is happening with disability perspectives included right from the beginning?
Yeah, I think this really has to be built into your design process. And the good news is, I'm sure you guys have heard the term universal design. I started hearing it 20 years ago. And so the fact that I'm still hearing it is really wonderful, because it means that it's stuck around on the business side of it. And the principle there is that we design for everybody. And when you design for everybody, it makes it better for everyone. And that's wonderful in practice. I think there is also this commitment piece that has to happen. That when you are, it's certainly, there's some time on the front end of the process, is what I will say. So you have to build in the time for testing, reevaluating, and then continuing on to, new prototypes. And that is a commitment. That is a part of our dev process. That's a part of a dev process I would build in anywhere. And the second thing is finding the right people. I just want to second what Tasnim said, that you can't just find one person in a group and assume that you've gotten the full story, particularly in device design. And in fact, I wish that piece of it was a little bit easier, but we are just committed to doing the work, which is going out, finding the space where people are at. I will say, for all the things the internet gives us these days, good and bad, it does allow us access to more people in more spaces. And really including them, like, we beta test and including them in the design process. And I will say, we've made several design adjustments that came specifically from user feedback, from ways they had modified their device to work for them. And we were like, okay, we're going to build that into this design of the product. So I think it really is conceptually believing in the universal design principles, and then having it built into your product development process is really important.
Awesome. Thanks, Kit. Okay, I just want to remind everybody, we've got about 10 to 15 minutes left. So if you do have questions that you would like to address to the panelists or to anybody else in the Zoom room today, please put those into the chat and we will look at those pretty quickly. But in the interim, while people are typing their questions, I would like to hear from the panelists, or quite frankly, from anybody in the room today, if you have something to add. After this conversation today, we've addressed that there are a lot of barriers, there's some solutions, and there's a long way to go. But I want to know, what is giving you hope in this space? Where do you see us going? And where do you see the sunrise and the improvements coming for us?
I'll jump in. I was thinking about grassroots organizations, small organizations that are thinking about this and, you know, plugging out to Monthly Dignity for doing this for people with disabilities, bringing the topic to the table. I think it's really important for us to talk about policy changes just in organizations to making this more the standard. And, you know, Periods for All, along with Monthly Dignity, really want to change this and make it more commonplace that if we are going to have these discussions, that disability justice should be included in them. So just being here today is making me super hopeful. I think if we were to leave today and every single one of us and the organizations that we're with commit to putting disability justice at the forefront and making accessibility and everyone at the table and the conversations that are happening on Zoom accessible and inclusive for people. That's how many people are on this call? 1, 2, 3, 4. Say 20 of us to round it off. That's a huge difference. And if all 20 of us were to commit to that, just on every single Zoom that we have from today, it's going to have a huge impact and it'll change how people show up. And I am so excited and I'm so grateful that we're here today showing up exactly like this.
Mm-hmm. And if I can add on to that, so you mentioned that, like, obviously policy changes need to happen. I would love to hear from any of our panelists. If you could pick one policy that could change or be added or be whatever, one policy change that could happen, what would that be for you?
I'm not sure what you changed. I can't see the interpreter. This is Ladan.
I think Haley is working on trying to fix that problem. She's got her thinking face on.
Sorry, all of a sudden, I don't know what changed on our end, but what we were able to do before, we can't do now. So we're working on a different option. Steph n'est pas là. Okay.
Are you able to remove Steph from the sign language interpreter room? That's what seemed to make her disappear in the regular room.
I don't think Steph is in the meeting anymore.
I see her as the American Sign Language in a separate window.
Oh, no.
That's weird. Sorry, folks.
Do you know the globe? The interpretation globe? It has French, English, ASL. I think if you pick ASL, you might see Steph.
Yeah, we're good. Okay.
Good to go.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're good to go. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks
Sorry.
everybody for
Thank you.
bearing with us for a second. Okay, we were talking about if
Quick
there was one
question.
policy. Yeah.
For the recording though, I can't see any interpretation. I don't know if there is some and I'm not seeing it, but just for the recording.
Okay, we'll figure that out after.
Okay, Haley is working on that.
Yes.
While they're working on that, if there was one policy that we could change to improve the menstrual equity space for people with disabilities, I would love to hear if anybody's got some thoughts about what that could be. Personally, I think this is said enough that it's almost kind of becoming a cliche, but it needs to continue being said because it's still not happening. We need free menstrual products, free and affordable menstrual products, and we need those to be a variety of menstrual products available to everybody. And education in a variety of formats about how to use those products. If we could legislate that federally across the whole country, especially in remote communities and isolated communities, I think that would be an incredible and incredibly impactful change. And if we have no other thoughts, I'm just going to check the chat one more time to see if there's any questions from the audience. I'm not seeing any. If you do think of any, please put them in. We are going to finish up with each of the panelists. If you
I
can
think
give us like,
Tasnim's hand is raised.
oh,
Sorry.
sorry, I missed you, Tasnim.
Sometimes
Go
it
ahead.
doesn't pop up.
No worries, thank you. Yeah, if I had a policy change that, a scenario that unfortunately I think is there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in order for us to get there. But if I had a dream policy scenario, I think about how, I would love to see down the road, accessibility standards for accessible washrooms include menstrual products. I think that would be my dream policy scenario. Free menstrual products, yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Tasneem. Okay, we are getting to the end of our time. I'm going to go back to each of our panelists just for about 30 seconds. If you have a final thought or a final takeaway for the group here, if you wouldn't mind sharing that. Holly, can we start with you? And then we'll move to Kit and then Tasneem.
The final takeaway today. I think the final takeaway is if everyone here did one thing when they left this meeting today that impacted the reach of disability justice when it comes to menstrual health, whether you share this recording once it's done, all the way to if you actually start talking about menstrual health when it comes to disability justice, we can start that ripple, right? I think this conversation isn't happening enough. Like Kit said, it's hard enough for people to talk about periods and menstruation and their cycles already. If they could actually, if every one of us could talk about the intersection of disability justice when it comes to that when we leave this room today, I think we could start having some conversation outside of this, and that would be great.
Jaisee, I can step in. I think I would just say this is always, sometimes we feel as a small business, it feels like we have strong headwinds we think it's such a great idea. It's such a great product. Like, yes, let's get people talking about it. And it is much harder to put into action, no matter how passionate we are. And so it is wonderful to be invited to these spaces. It is always reinvigorating to hear, like, yes, okay, there are people, we care, and we're making some progress in this. And I think that in and of itself is very important. So thank you so much for putting this on and inviting us to it. And I think every time I hear stories from people, it gives us more of an idea about education. Can we get into schools? Who's making decisions about bathrooms? What can we do in our world to be a part of that? So this is just a wonderful, I think everything starts here, places like this where we start having conversations.
And Tasneem, any final thoughts?
Yeah, as final thoughts, just thank you everyone for joining for this conversation today. Uh, and I would say that as a takeaway message, that in all of the works that everyone here is going to be doing, menstrual equity initiatives, or at large, just community initiatives to support one another, to continue thinking of people with disabilities and the way that this world, has an impact for us. Because the thing is, accessibility isn't just important for people with disabilities, it's important for everybody at large. In the works that everyone is doing, I would certainly encourage I would encourage you to include the perspectives of people with disabilities, and because um, oftentimes I find that that is very much missing. And so I was just so excited to see this panel coming together because I've never had the opportunity to speak on menstrual equity with a disability justice focus. So this is a very unique initiative and in a really, really positive way. So I'm happy that this is happening, and I hope to see more of these types of programs from all of you here that are joining us in the little ways that we can. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tasnim. If anybody needs to run, if you've got a tight schedule, it is 1:30, but I'm going to pass it back to Haley to close us out.
Sorry, I don't have much more to add. This was amazing. I'm hoping that this is one of many events and opportunities that we have to kind of gather and rally around this topic, especially like I was saying earlier, how as the movement continues to grow, as policies become implemented, as programs become permanent and change and grow, making sure that we're taking all the things that we learned with us today, and keeping that in our minds and holding it in our hearts as we kind of like make those considerations going forward. And I just want to say a huge thank you again to Holly and to the interpreters who joined us today, and to our panelists and to Jaisee. There was a lot of moving parts that went into such a short Zoom event for today. And so I'm so grateful also to everybody who came out to support and listen and learn. So yeah, thank you so much for joining. We can follow up with emails and contact info. Feel free to shoot us a message. I'll put my email in the chat if anybody wants to keep in touch, or if you have follow-up questions or want to get in touch with somebody, please just don't hesitate to let us know. And yeah, thank you so much. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Tuesdays.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Just